Captain James Mitchell stood on the bridge of the New Horizons, watching to the massive viewport as an alien ship approached. It was unlike anything humans had ever built. All smooth curves and glowing panels that pulsed with strange light. After months of radio signals back and forth, this was it. First contact with an actual alien civilization. "They're requesting permission to dock, sir," called out Lieutenant Thompson from her station. Her voice carried a mix of excitement and nervousness that everyone on the bridge shared. "Granted," James replied, straightening his uniform jacket. He'd practiced this moment 1,000 times, but his heart still hammered against his ribs. "All departments, prepare for our guests." The Galactic Council had been very specific in their messages. They were coming to assess humanity and determine where humans fit in the greater galactic community. There was something about the way they phrased things that bothered James, like they'd already made up their minds about what humans were capable of. The airlock seal was softest, and James found himself face to face with 3 of the strangest beings he'd ever imagined. The first looked like it was made of living crystal, tall and angular, with light dancing through its transparent body. When it spoke, the words came out like the sound of wind chimes. "I am Ambassador Veltar, the Crystalline Dominion," it said, though its mouth didn't move. The translation device on its chest glowed as it spoke. "We come to meet the inhabitants of the class 12 Death World you call Earth." The way it said inhabitants made James's jaw tighten. Not citizens, not people, inhabitants, like they were animals in a zoo. The second alien was even stranger, a writhing mass of purple tentacles covered in glowing spots that flashed in complex patterns. "I am more done of the Deep Collective." It gurgled through what might have been a mouth. "Your existence troubles our understanding of the universe." Dr. Robert Hayes, the ship's chief scientist, stepped forward with a kind of enthusiasm he usually reserved for discovering new elements. "Troubles your understanding? How so?" "We'd love to learn more about your classification systems." The third alien hadn't spoken yet. It looked almost humanoid, but its skin was a deep blue-black and covered in scales that seemed to absorb light. When it finally moved, its voice was like grinding stone. "Your world should not produce intelligence. It should only produce death." James felt his crew shift uncomfortably behind him, but he kept his voice steady. "Well, we're here, so I guess we proved that theory wrong. What exactly makes you think Earth is so dangerous?" Ambassador Veltar's crystalline form pulsed brighter. "Gravity 3 times standard. Atmospheric pressure that would crush most species. Weather systems that regularly destroy continents. Biological organisms that consume other organisms for sustenance. Volcanic activity. Tectonic instability. Solar radiation levels that would sterilize most worlds." Thompson laughed. Actually laughed, which made all 3 aliens turn their attention to her. "I'm sorry," she said, not sounding sorry at all, "but you just described a pretty normal Tuesday on Earth. Are you saying most planets aren't like this?" The aliens exchanged what might have been glances. Mordunn's tentacles writhed faster, his light patterns flickering in what seemed like agitation. "Most civilized worlds have stable climates, peaceful ecosystems, and controllable environmental factors. Your world is classified as a death world because it actively tries to kill everything on it." Dr. Hayes looked genuinely confused. "But that's what makes it interesting. The challenges, the diversity, the constant adaptation required. How do species develop resilience and creativity without obstacles to overcome?" The silence that followed was deafening. James could practically see the aliens processing this response, and he got the distinct impression they hadn't expected it. "You find these challenges enjoyable?" Veltar asked, its voice carrying a note of something that might have been disbelief. "Not always enjoyable," James admitted, "but definitely educational. Every hurricane teaches us more about atmospheric dynamics. Every earthquake helps us understand geological processes. Every predator shows us new approaches to problem solving." The blue-scaled alien, who still hadn't given its name, stepped closer. "You speak of your world's attempts to kill you as if they were gifts. Aren't they?" Dr. Hayes asked, his excitement growing. "Every challenge survived is knowledge gained. Every disaster overcome is a skill developed. Earth didn't just give us life. It gave us the tools to handle anything the universe could throw at us. The three aliens huddled together, their communication too rapid and alien for the translators to follow. When they separated, More Dunn spoke for the group. We must conduct tests to verify your claims. We have brought specimens from other death worlds, creatures that have terrorized the galaxy for millennia. If you are truly what you claim to be, you will not flee when confronted with true danger. James looked back at his crew and saw the same expression on every face. Not fear, but curiosity. These aliens thought they were about to terrify a bunch of soft creatures from a backwater world. They had no idea they were dealing with the descendants of people who had looked at every dangerous thing Earth could produce and said, "How can we make friends with this?" "Bring them on," James said with a grin. "We can't wait to meet them." 3 weeks had passed since the first alien encounter, and Commander Lisa Parker thought she'd seen everything the galaxy had to offer. She was wrong. Dead wrong. The meeting station floated in neutral space, a sterile diplomatic facility designed to host encounters between different species. Lisa had spent days preparing for this meeting. Reading every scrap of information the Galactic Council had provided about the Vorthack. Most of it boiled down to one simple message. These beings were the stuff of nightmares. The Vorthack came from a world of endless glass storms and acid rain, where silicon-based life forms had evolved into living weapons. For over 1,000 years, they had been the galaxy's ultimate enforcers. When the Council needed someone intimidated, they sent the Vorthack. When entire star systems needed to be reminded of their place, the Vorthack showed up and everything went quiet. No species had ever challenged them. No one had ever even tried to negotiate as equals. The very mention of their name was enough to end conflicts across dozens of worlds. Lisa stood in the conference room, checking her tablet one more time while her diplomatic team made final preparations. Dr. Michael Chun, their xenobiology expert, was practically vibrating with excitement in his chair. Lieutenant Colonel Brad Stevens, her security chief, looked like he was trying very hard not to reach for his sidearm. The first sign of their arrival was a sound, a deep, resonating hum that seemed to vibrate through the station's hull. Then came the footsteps, each one making the reinforced deck plating crack with sharp pops that echoed through corridors. When the conference room doors opened, Lisa understood immediately why entire civilizations feared these beings. The Vorthack were magnificent and terrifying in equal measure. They stood nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies looking like they'd been carved from volcanic glass. Their skin caught and reflected light in ways that hurt to look at directly, and when they moved, the sound was like crystal wind chimes in a hurricane. The largest of them entered first, his steps leaving actual fractures in the floor. When he spoke, his voice sounded like continents grinding against each other. "I am Warthek the Render, Prime of the Southern Glass Reaches. You will identify yourselves and state your purpose." Lisa stepped forward with the same calm confidence she'd used in boardrooms back on Earth. "Welcome to the station, Warthek. I'm Commander Lisa Parker of the Human Colonial Fleet. We're here because the Galactic Council thought it would be valuable for our species to meet. Please have a seat. We've adjusted the atmospheric controls to match your homeworld specifications." Warthek stopped moving entirely. In 1,000 years of diplomacy, no one had ever offered him comfort before. His crystalline features shifted in what might have been confusion. "You concern yourself with our comfort?" "Of course," Lisa replied, gesturing to the specially reinforced chairs they'd installed. "Long journeys can be exhausting, regardless of species. Can we offer you anything? We have various mineral solutions if you need to replenish your silicon levels." Dr. Chen leaned forward eagerly. "Actually, I've been absolutely fascinated by your species' evolution. A silicon-based life form developing tool use, an abstract thought is incredible. The chemical processes alone must be completely different from carbon-based cognition." The 7 Vorthack delegates looked at each other with expressions that their translators couldn't quite capture. Warthek lowered himself into the reinforced chair with movements that suggested he was still processing what was happening. "You study us as if we were specimens," he said, but there was no anger in his voice, only confusion. "Not specimens," Dr. Chen corrected enthusiastically. "As fellow intelligent beings with a completely different evolutionary path. Do you mind if I ask about your homeworld's glass storms? How do you navigate in zero visibility conditions? And the acid rain, does it actually benefit your silicon-based metabolism, or is it just something you've adapted to tolerate? Lisa watched in fascination as Warthek began to answer, slowly at first, then with growing engagement. The being who had terrorized the galaxy for centuries was giving what amounted to an academic lecture on Vorthak biology and culture. The conversation continued for over an hour before disaster struck. Warthek was explaining the complex social hierarchies of glasscrafting guilds, his arms moving in broad gestures to illustrate points about crystalline architecture. In his enthusiasm, and Lisa was certain now that it was genuine enthusiasm, his razor-sharp arms swept too close to her position. The cut was instantaneous and precise. Warthek's limb sliced through her uniform sleeve and into the flesh of her forearm, like it was made of butter. Blood immediately began flowing from the 6-inch gash. The room went dead silent. Every Vorthak delegate tensed, expecting screams, accusations, or at minimum some form of distress response. In their experience, beings who were injured by Vorthak weapons either died quickly or spent their remaining time in agony. Instead, Lisa looked down at the wound with genuine curiosity. She pulled a medical kit from her belt and began cleaning the cut while examining it closely. "Wow," she said, her voice filled with scientific interest. "Look at how clean this cut is. Your arm must be sharp at the molecular level. This is going to make a fascinating scar." She looked up at Warthek with a smile. "Does this precision come from natural evolution, or do your people enhance their limbs artificially?" Warthek stared at the human, who was casually bandaging a wound that should have sent her into shock. His voice, when he finally found it, was barely a whisper. "You are not distressed?" "Distressed? Why would I be distressed? It was clearly an accident, and it's actually quite educational. I've never seen such precise cutting ability." Lisa finished wrapping the bandage and flexed her arm experimentally. Perfect mobility maintained, minimal tissue damage despite the depth. "Your people must be incredibly skilled surgeons." Dr. Chin was already pulling out his scanner. "Could we get some readings on the cutting mechanism?" "For medical research purposes, of course. This kind of precision could revolutionize human surgical techniques." Warthek looked around the room at his fellow delegates, all of whom appeared to be experiencing the same existential confusion he was feeling. These soft, water-based creatures were treating an encounter with the galaxy's most feared weapons as an educational opportunity. When the meeting finally ended 2 hours later, Warthek stood in the docking bay of his ship, staring out at the human vessel as it prepared to depart. His second-in-command, Shardek, approached with obvious concern. "Prime, your assessment of these humans?" Warthek was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a note of something that might have been wonder. Admiral Kate Wilson stared at the holographic display, showing 2 of the most hostile worlds in the known galaxy, and couldn't help but grin. After 30 years in the Colonial Marines, she'd learned that when someone told her something was impossible, it usually just meant they hadn't tried hard enough. The Galactic Council's challenge had arrived that morning, delivered by a very nervous-looking diplomatic courier who seemed convinced he was delivering humanity's death warrant. The message was simple: prove your species belongs in galactic civilization by surviving on worlds that have killed thousands of explorers from dozens of different species. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Kate said to the hologram of Council Representative Zilnath, whose insect-like features clicked with what she assumed was satisfaction. "You want us to not just survive on these death worlds, but to establish functioning settlements?" "Temporary settlements," Zilnath corrected, his translator struggling with what sounded like smugness. "Though we expect you will be too busy dying to accomplish even that. Keth Moran has claimed over 3,000 explorers in the last century alone. Zirian Prime has never had a successful landing." Kate studied the data streams flowing across her screen. Keth Moran was a world locked in perpetual volcanic winter, where sulfur dioxide snow fell from skies the color of dried blood. The average temperature was minus 40 Celsius, and the atmosphere would dissolve most breathing equipment within hours. Zirian Prime was tidally locked to its star, with a day side hot enough to melt copper and a night side cold enough to turn oxygen into a solid. "And if we succeed?" Kate asked. Then perhaps we have underestimated your species, Zilnath replied, though such an outcome is statistically impossible. 3 days later, Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bradley stood in the cargo bay of the exploration vessel Endurance, addressing his team of 12 volunteers. They were the best of the best, engineers, scientists, medics, and survival specialists who had signed up for what everyone expected to be a suicide mission. "All right, people," Tom said, his voice carrying the calm confidence that had gotten him through 20 years of impossible assignments. "We've got 6 days to prove that humans can not only survive on Kethmoran, but build something useful while we're there. Questions?" Dr. Jennifer Nash, their geologist, raised her hand with obvious excitement. "Are we really going to be the first people to study active sulfur-based volcanism up close? Because I've been reading the preliminary surveys, and the mineral formations down there are unlike anything we've ever seen." Tom smiled. Nash had volunteered for this mission the second she'd heard about Kethmoran's unique geology. "That's the plan, document. Assuming we don't get dissolved by the atmosphere first." "The breathing gear will hold," insisted Chief Engineer Roy Patterson, patting the custom-built environmental suits his team had designed. "I've tested these systems against every corrosive compound we could synthesize. They'll keep us alive long enough to get established." The drop to Kethmoran's surface was like descending into hell. The sky was a roiling mass of orange and red clouds that spat lightning in colors that hurt to look at. Sulfur dioxide snow drifted across a landscape that looked like it had been designed by someone with a very dark imagination. Jagged volcanic peaks stretching to horizon, steam vents hissing poisonous gases, and lakes of bubbling acid that glow with their own eerie light. Temperature reading -38 and dropping, called out Medic Linda Torres as the team shuttle touched down on a relatively stable lava flow. Atmospheric composition is 90% sulfur dioxide, 8% carbon monoxide, 2% things I can't even pronounce. "Sounds like a typical Tuesday in the industrial district back home," joked Sergeant Dave Collins, shouldering his equipment pack. "At least it's not raining." It started raining sulfuric acid 20 minutes later, but instead of retreating to their shuttle, the team did something that would have baffled any other species in the galaxy. They got to work. Within 6 hours, they had established a functioning base camp using locally available materials. Dr. Nash had identified several stable cave systems that could provide shelter and had already begun cataloging mineral samples that made her practically glow with excitement. "Tom, you need to see this," she called through the comm system on day 3. "I'm standing in a cavern that's basically a natural chemical laboratory. The sulfur formations down here are creating compounds I've never seen before. We could revolutionize materials science with what we're finding." By day 5, they had built a geothermal power generator using the volcanic vents, established a water reclamation system that turned sulfuric acid into usable compounds, and had mapped over 30 square kilometers of the surrounding territory. Their daily reports back to the Galactic Council observers read less like survival logs and more like excited field notes from scientists who had stumbled into paradise. Day 6 final report. Tom transmitted as their pickup shuttle approached. Mission objectives exceeded. "We've established a fully functional research station capable of supporting long-term habitation, recommending immediate follow-up expeditions. There's incredible potential here for resource extraction and scientific research." The Council observers watched in stunned silence as the humans not only survived but thrived on a world that had killed thousands of other beings. 2 weeks later, the same team found themselves preparing to land on Zirian Prime, the tidally locked world that had never seen a successful landing. The day side was a hellscape of molten rock and superheated atmosphere, while the night side was a frozen wasteland where the air itself turned solid. "The secret is the Twilight Zone," explained Dr. Nash, who had become the unofficial leader of what the media was calling humanity's impossible expeditions. Right at the boundary between day and night, the temperature gradient creates incredible opportunities for energy generation. She was right. Within a week, the human settlement in Zirian Prime's Twilight Zone was producing more power than their own mothership. They had built thermal exchange systems that harvested energy from the temperature differential, established greenhouses that used controlled exposure to both sides of the planet, and had created a communications relay that could reach ships 3 star systems away. Captain David Foster's final report to the Council was delivered with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for announcing lottery wins. Both worlds represent incredible opportunities for development. We've left detailed surveys and supply caches for future expeditions. The mineral wealth on Kethmoran alone could supply the entire sector for centuries, and Zirion Prime's energy potential is virtually unlimited. He paused, looking directly into the camera with a grin that the Council observers would remember for years. Thank you for showing us these amazing places. We never would have found them on our own, and they're going to be incredible additions to human colonial space. We owe you one. The transmission ended, leaving the Council chamber in absolute silence. Representative Zilnatha's mandibles clicked in what might have been distress. They thanked us, he said finally, his voice filled with disbelief. We sent them to worlds designed to kill them, and they thanked us for the opportunity. For the first time in galactic history, the Council began to wonder if they had fundamentally misunderstood what it meant to be alive in a hostile universe. These humans didn't just survive impossible odds. They transformed them into advantages. And that changed everything. Dr. Amanda Clark stood in the observation deck of the research station, watching long-range sensors track something that made every other species in the galaxy pack up and run. The Nethi swarm was coming, and it was massive. A cloud of microscopic organisms stretching across 3 light-years of space, consuming everything in its path. For 2,000 years, the Nethys had been the galaxy's ultimate nightmare. They were parasites that worked as a collective intelligence, capable of taking over any biological organism they encountered. Entire star systems had been evacuated at the first sign of their approach. Civilizations had fallen when even a single infected ship made it past their quarantine lines. The standard galactic protocol was simple. Run fast, run far, and pray they didn't follow you. Amanda adjusted her glasses and took another sip of coffee. Estimated time of arrival at New Terra Colony? 4 days, 18 hours, replied Captain Brian Murphy from his position at the tactical display. His research vessel Darwin was positioned at the edge of human space, directly in the swarm's path. The evacuation fleets from other systems started jumping out 3 days ago. "And we're staying because?" asked Lieutenant Jessica Hayes, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. "Because running away never taught anyone anything useful," Amanda replied with the kind of calm that had gotten her through 15 years of studying the galaxy's most dangerous biological phenomena. Besides, we're scientists. This is the first time anyone's had a chance to study the Nethys up close with modern equipment. Dr. Robert Chun, their xenobiologist, looked up from his microscope array with obvious excitement. "The preliminary samples we collected from that derelict ship last month are incredible. The Nethys aren't just parasites. They're biological engineers. The way they modify host organisms is more sophisticated than anything we've ever developed." Captain Murphy shook his head with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You people realize that every other species considers the Nethys to be the galactic equivalent of a plague, right? The kind that ends civilizations. Every species except us," Amanda pointed out. "We haven't tried yet. The first contact came 18 hours ahead of schedule. Long-range sensors detected a small Nethi scout cloud that had broken off from the main swarm, probably drawn by the electromagnetic signatures of the research station. Within 6 hours, several members of the Darwin's crew were showing signs of infection. Dr. Hayes was the first to report symptoms. "I'm feeling a bit strange," she said during the morning briefing, though she looked more curious than concerned. "There's this weird tingling sensation, like something's moving under my skin." Standard protocol would have been immediate quarantine and preparation for the worst. Instead, Amanda ordered continuous monitoring and detailed biological scans. "How's your cognitive function? Any changes in reflexes, memory, or reasoning ability?" "Actually, I feel sharper than usual," Jessica replied, demonstrating by catching a stylus that Robert had accidentally knocked off the table before it had fallen 6 inches. "My reaction time seems faster, and I'm noticing details I would have missed before." By day 3, the changes were undeniable. The infected crew members hadn't been taken over. They'd been enhanced. Their reflexes were faster, their healing accelerated, and their problem-solving abilities had improved dramatically. More importantly, they remained completely themselves. This doesn't match any of the historical records, Amanda said, reviewing the biological scans. According to every report we have, Nethi's infection should result in complete host domination within 48 hours. Maybe the historical records were wrong, suggested Robert. Or maybe they never had hosts quite like humans before. The real breakthrough came when Jessica made contact with the Nethi's collective consciousness directly, instead of the expected mental domination. She found herself in what could only be described as a conversation. "They're not trying to control me," she reported, her eyes wide with wonder. "They're curious. They've never encountered a host species that didn't immediately try to reject them or get consumed by them. They're asking questions about human creativity, about how we solve problems." "What kind of questions?" Amanda asked, her scientific excitement overriding any reasonable fear. "They want to know why we build things that serve no survival purpose. Why we create art. Why we explore dangerous places just to learn about them. Why we help other species, even when there's no benefit to us. They've been a collective intelligence for millennia, but they've never encountered individual creativity before. The partnership that emerged over the following weeks revolutionized everything humans thought they knew about biology and technology. The Nethys weren't just learning from their human hosts. They were collaborating with them. The microscopic organisms provided biological processing power that human brains could never match, while humans provided the creative thinking and individual initiative that the collective had never possessed. Lieutenant Patricia Moore, a communications specialist who'd been infected on day 2, made the first technological breakthrough. "I think I can build a faster-than-light communication system," she announced during a routine briefing, then paused with a slight frown. "Actually, I'm not sure if that was my idea or theirs. It's getting hard to tell where my thoughts end and their suggestions begin." "Is that a problem?" Amanda asked. Patricia considered this for a moment, then smiled. "No, not really. It's more like having a really smart research partner who happens to live in my bloodstream. They handle the complex biological calculations. I handle the creative leaps and engineering applications." Within a month, Human Nethi's hybrid technology had produced communication systems that could transmit messages instantly across galactic distances, self-repair materials that adapted to environmental challenges in real time, and energy generation systems that were almost impossibly efficient. The main Nethi swarm arrived at New Terra Colony exactly on schedule, but instead of the expected devastation, they found something unprecedented, a thriving partnership between individual and collective intelligence. The swarm consciousness, speaking through willing human hosts, requested permission to establish permanent research stations in human space. Captain Murphy, now serving as humanity's primary liaison with collective, transmitted the news that would shock the galaxy. The Nethys aren't a plague. They're a species that's been looking for partners for 2,000 years and never found any until now. Every other species either tried to fight them or got completely overwhelmed by them. Humans are apparently the first species stubborn enough to find a middle ground. The galactic response was immediate and dramatic. Species that had fled the Nethys for millennia began requesting meetings with human ambassadors. Ancient quarantine zones were open for the first time in centuries as Human Nethi's exploration teams began investigating regions that had been considered permanently lost. Dr. Amanda Clark, now enhanced with Nethi's biological processing capabilities, published her final report on the phenomenon 6 months after first contact. The Nethys represent the single greatest advancement in human capability since the development of agriculture. They don't change what we are. They make us better at being what we already were. She paused in her recording, consulting with her microscopic partners for a moment before continuing. The galaxy has spent 2,000 years running from a Nethys because they assumed partnership was impossible. They never considered that the solution wasn't to fight the collective or be consumed by it, but to find a way to maintain individual creativity while gaining collective knowledge. As usual, humans found the third option that nobody else thought to look for. The transformation was complete. Humanity hadn't just survived contact with the galaxy's most feared biological weapon. They'd turned it into the foundation for a new kind of civilization entirely. Ambassador Rebecca Turner stood before the largest gathering of intelligent species in galactic history and couldn't help but smile at how different everything looked compared to 5 years ago. The old Galactic Council chamber had been a sterile, intimidating space designed to maintain rigid hierarchies. This new assembly hall buzzed with conversation, collaboration, and something the galaxy hadn't seen in millennia. Genuine excitement about the future. To her left sat Warthek, though he long since dropped his old title to Render in favor of the Builder. The 7-foot crystalline being who had once terrorized star systems now spent his days designing magnificent structures that span entire solar systems, combining Vorthack precision with human creativity. His latest project was a space elevator on Kepler 442b that would have been impossible without both species working together. To her right, Lieutenant Commander Jessica Hayes served as the primary voice of the Nethys Collective, though the distinction between individual and collective thoughts had become beautifully blurred over the years. The microscopic organisms that had once been the galaxy's greatest fear now served as living communication networks, allowing instant collaboration between species separated by thousands of light years. 5 years ago, Rebecca began, her voice carrying easily to the chamber's advanced acoustics, the galaxy was defined by fear. Fear of death worlds, fear of other species, fear of the unknown. Today, we're here to celebrate something unprecedented, a universe where cooperation has replaced conquest, where diversity has become strength. In the audience, she could see representatives from over 300 species, many of whom had been mythical monsters just years before. The Vorthack delegation sat comfortably next to humans, sharing technical specifications for their latest joint construction projects. Former pirates from the Outer Rim territories worked alongside Galactic Patrol forces. Their knowledge of hidden routes in dangerous regions now used to guide rescue missions rather than raids. Dr. William Harrison, now in his 70s and serving as humanity's chief scientific advisor, stood to address the assembly. His hair had gone completely white, but his eyes still held the same curiosity that had driven him to study alien specimens when everyone else was running in terror. "When we first encountered a galactic community," he said with a warm smile, "they tested us by introducing us to their most feared creatures. They expected us to run. Instead, we asked if we could be friends." Laughter rippled through the chamber, a sound that would have been impossible in the old council. The transformation was visible everywhere. Keth Moran, the sulfur-wreathed death world that killed thousands of explorers, now hosted the galaxy's premier research university. Students from dozens of species studied there, learning to see extreme environments as opportunities rather than obstacles. The volcanic world's unique chemistry had led to breakthroughs in materials science that benefited everyone. Zirion Prime had become the sector's primary industrial hub, its extreme temperature gradients powering manufacturing facilities that produced everything from starships to artistic sculptures. The tidally locked world that once killed anyone who tried to land there now employed millions of beings from across the galaxy. Captain David Foster, now Admiral of the Deep Space Exploration Corps, gave the day's most important announcement. This month, we'll be opening 3 new sectors that were considered permanently uninhabitable. The Shattered Nebula region, the Gravity Well Cluster, and the infamous dark matter storms of Sector 7 will all welcome their first permanent settlers. Each of these regions have been written off as impossible death traps. The Shattered Nebula contained the remnants of supernova that created constantly shifting gravitational fields. The Gravity Well Cluster featured planets where surface gravity could change by factors of 10 within minutes. The dark matter storms were exactly what they sounded like, regions where reality itself seemed to bend and twist. But humans, working with their new partners, had found ways to not just survive in these places but thrive. The Vorthack's crystalline structures could adapt to changing gravity fields. The Nethys Collective could process the complex calculations needed to navigate dark matter storms. Human creativity tied it all together with solutions that no single species could have imagined. Dr. Patricia Moore, her body now seamlessly integrated with Nethys organisms, provided the technical overview. We're not conquering these regions. We're forming partnerships with them. Each extreme environment teaches us something new about the universe and about ourselves. The old concept of death worlds had completely disappeared from galactic vocabulary. In its place was a new classification system based on development potential and partnership opportunities. What had once been considered the universe's most dangerous places were now known as its most valuable real estate. Lieutenant Colonel Tom Bradley, the man who had led humanity's first impossible survival mission, now trained mixed-species exploration teams. The key, he told new recruits from dozens of different worlds, isn't to fight your environment or try to dominate it. The key is to understand what it needs and figure out how to give that while getting what you need in return. This philosophy had become known as the human doctrine, though it was being practiced by species throughout the galaxy. Ancient territorial disputes evaporated when everyone realized that cooperation yielded exponentially better results than competition. Why fight over resources when you could work together to find entirely new ones? Perhaps the most remarkable change was in the galaxy's children. Young beings from dozens of species grew up playing together on worlds that their parents had considered impossibly dangerous. They learned from each other's strengths and helped compensate for each other's weaknesses. Fear of other species was becoming a historical curiosity. Warthek rose to give the Assembly's closing address, his crystalline voice now carrying warmth that would have been impossible years before. The humans taught us that there is no such thing as an enemy, only potential friends we haven't understood yet. They showed us that the universe isn't trying to kill us, it's trying to teach us. He paused, looking around the chamber at beings who had once been considered monsters, now working together to build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. Today, we announce a formation of the Universal Partnership Alliance. Not a government to rule, but a network to connect. Not laws to restrict, but principles to guide. We are no longer dozens of species trying to survive in a hostile universe. We are one galaxy learning to thrive together. As the assembly erupted in celebration, Rebecca looked out through the massive viewport at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, human ships were working alongside Vorthak engineers and Nethi's navigators to explore regions that had been forbidden for millennia. Ancient ruins were being carefully excavated by mixed teams who treated each discovery as a gift rather than a conquest. The deadliest Deathworld species had indeed met humans, and the galaxy would never be the same, because it was finally safe for everyone to call home.